Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. I've been talking about this Mythical Monsters stamp set quite a bit and how I wanted to use it for Valentine's Day. And Valentine's Day is finally coming up. So in today's video, I'm going to walk you through several different types of Valentines you can make using this set, showing a bunch of different techniques you can also bring in other stamp sets to create these techniques with. So let's get into it. So the reason I'm using this Mythical Monsters stamp set is because I just love the great sentiments that go along with them. Lots of them work really well for Valentine's, like I only have eyes for you, you look beautiful, I think you're cool, I'm wild about you. There's tons that really would work in here for Valentine's Day. And also, these guys are just so adorable. So if you do get this for Valentine's Day, it's also gonna work great for Halloween later, and I even showed some cards using it for Christmas too. So this one is super versatile. All right, starting off with this first card, I'm going to create a shaker card. I think this is a really fun type of project for Valentine's Day. Of course, this is one you might wanna take a little bit more time on for the person you send it to, so you can't really mass produce this one, but it's a ton of fun. So I'm gonna take this kind of mid-sized heart from a layering heart set. I think this one might be discontinued, but I'll find one that's very similar. And I'm going to line it up on sort of the left half of my card here. And then once it's lined up, I'll place a piece of mint tape down to hold it in place while I run it through my die cutting machine. And then I'll run this right through to cut it out. All right, then we can pop this heart right out. And we've got a really nice heart window that we've die cut for the shaker window. Then for my card base, I cut a piece of stark white cardstock in half. And usually I make top folding cards, but since this one is landscape, I'm going to do a side folding card and of course turn it horizontally. So I'll go in, score that down, and then I'm going to crease it down. And I love this Teflon bone folder because it doesn't make any marks. So I bought this one separate from the board and it doesn't make any shiny marks when you crease your card. Then I want there to be a red background, so I'm going to take a piece of this red cardstock and adhere it onto my card base. This isn't as thick as my stark white cardstock, so I like to just layer it on top rather than making the card base out of it. And then I'll just add it at the top of the fold there, line it up, and then place it down, and it should line up with the rest of our card. In my last shaker card video, I told you guys I bought acetate and couldn't find it. I located it. So this is the Scrapbookcom acetate sheets. There is a lot in here. I think there's like 25 or something. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, but there's a lot of acetate in here, and I love just how clear it is compared to the plastic packaging that I was using. So I'm just going to trim down a piece of this acetate that's going to work for my heart window. Then I'll add some tape runner all around the heart on the back of this white panel, and this is going to stick the acetate down. Some people like to use liquid glue here, but I find that the tape runner is a little bit better since it dries so much faster and it's not gonna ooze out from underneath of the acetate. And once that's adhered, we've got a great acetate window. And again, I love how see-through these ones are. When it comes to foam tape, this is a super important tip, okay? I'm gonna grab my 3M foam tape, about as much as I think I need. That's a good amount. And then I'm going to fold it back onto itself. This is a super helpful trick because you want it to be double as thick so you can fit a couple more sequins inside of there. So folding it onto itself is really helpful. And I like to make sure it's nice and even so that no sticky parts are gonna show. Now here's the important part. Before you remove any of this tape on either side, I powder the edges of my foam tape. And the reason why I do this is because it makes it a lot less sticky on this edge. Whereas I find sometimes sequins get stuck there, which is not great because it's a little bit sticky still. So powdering the edge is going to help prevent the sequins from sticking. And you know what, with some of this, I'm actually gonna cut this in half and then I'm going to cut my foam tape in half lengthwise. And this is because I find that it's easier to bend and maneuver around the card and you save a little bit of foam tape when doing it. So I like to cut it in half. Now call me crazy, but I also like to powder the acetate because sometimes there's a little bit of static there. So I just powder it and then I kind of wipe it away and that should be good enough to not make the sequins kind of cling to the acetate. There's a lot of tips, but I've had so many shakers where I put them together and they just don't shake. So this is helpful. All right, so then peel off the backing tape here, and this is going to make it so you can really easily maneuver it. So again, these thin strips are going to be used for right around the heart, and you can see how easily bendable they are since we cut it like that. And then anytime you have to start more foam tape, butt it up against the last one, and then continue going around your border. And I just need one more little piece down here, so I'm going to bud one more up and then rip it off right at the end. Then I just take any of this excess foam tape and fill it in the other areas around the shaker card. All right, I'm gonna hold this over top so I know about where to put the sequins because we wanna lay them onto the actual colored card front. So I'm starting off with kind of this reddish sequin mix that has sequins in a bunch of different sizes in this red and pink color. I really like these ones, so I'm gonna put a lot of these in here, and I'll link to one that's similar to this. It might be discontinued by now, but I'll link to one that I can find that's similar. And then same thing with this next mix. I like to mix in a couple of these clear sequins as well. I find these to be really great for the shaker cards, so I'm going to lay those in, and you can see I'm kind of piling them up in the center. We don't want any kind of going outside of this center area. This is about where the heart is gonna be. Then I'll look over top, I'm going to line it up, and then I will adhere this right down onto my card. And you wanna make sure it's good and pressed down, especially around that border, before you lift it up or start shaking it. And once that's all adhered, you're ready to shake around your sequin mix. And I absolutely love how that looks. The sequins together in there look just beautiful against that red cardstock backing. And none of them are really sticking to the edge, which is really great. All right, now I'm going into the Mythical Monster stamp set, and I happen to love this one at the bottom that says, "You look beautiful," and this little guy with the wig on, but of course, you could use any of these with any sentiments. I thought this one was great though. So I'm gonna peel it out, and I'll peel out a sentiment as well. All right, then I'll add these onto acrylic blocks. I'm gonna use the sentiment acrylic block for this one. And to stamp down the monster, I'm using VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink to get a nice jet black outline and a nice crisp image. So I'm gonna stamp that onto my stark white cardstock, giving it some good pressure to make sure it transfers. And there we go. And then since this ink takes a little bit longer to dry, you can throw over some clear embossing powder to help set the ink, and it'll make it nice and shiny. All right, then I'm gonna add a little bit of Prom Queen ink down onto my craft sheet here. And I'll also use a bit of bee sting so we can match that red color we used on the card as we're watercoloring. And these images are so simple to color in. So all you need to do is add water down first, and I'm just doing this right onto my stark white cardstock. It takes the watercolor really nicely. And then once I've added that layer of water, I'm gonna go in with my first color. So here I'm using Prom Queen and quite a bit of water for this first layer, and I'm just going to add a wash of color all throughout this monster. And these guys don't need to be perfect, but that water really helps to make sure that that first layer is going to blend around without just sinking right into the cardstock. So you can see how nice and smooth that blend is because of the water we added at the beginning. Then to add darker color, I'm just going to pick up more of that same Prom Queen color and less water, and we can go in and add some shading. And you can see that just by adding that same color down with less water, you get a lot different of a color, which is really awesome. And then of course to blend it out, just kind of go back in with a little more water and fade out that color a bit. And I just add shading wherever different body parts meet. So where that hair meets the head, you're gonna add a little bit of shading. Where his mouth kind of folds over, you're gonna add a little bit of shading as well. And if we wanna make it even darker, we can go in with that red and add a little bit of red in there as well for even more shading. All right, and then I'm gonna go in and fussy cut this out using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. There was no dies for this stamp set, but it's pretty easy to cut out. All you need to do is just leave a little bit of a white border and get around some of those details. And I'm gonna tell you right now, these Fiskars Spring Assist scissors really help. They've got that spring, so they spring back out at you so your hands don't get tired. And I also find that it helps me get a little bit of a smoother line since I'm not having to do the work of reopening the scissors every time. So I really like these for cutting out images like this. And if there's a big area like this that you don't want to get into, don't worry, you don't have to. You can just kind of round that corner and then keep continuing on in your image. And especially since we're adding it onto a white background, it's not like it's gonna really matter. I'm gonna do some heat embossing on this red color cardstock. It's the same color cardstock we used earlier. I'm going to stamp down this "You Look Beautiful" sentiment using a little bit of Versamark clear sticky ink. And we'll stamp it down right at the bottom edge there. And for this sentiment, I'm gonna use a little bit of white heat embossing powder to really make it stand out. I'll tap off the excess. And I also like to lightly blow. I find that it helps get rid of any of the excess stray powders, and then we can heat set it till it's nice and bright white. Usually I like to fussy cut around the details, but today I like the look of just leaving it on that rectangle, so that's what I'm gonna do. Then I'll place the monster right down on the right side, kind of overhanging into that heart, and usually I would add down this sentiment straight. However, today, because of the playful nature of the monster, having it straight just doesn't look right to me, so what I'm gonna do is just tilt it a little bit like this and make it look like he kind of kicked it. And it just goes more along with the playful nature of that monster. And I'll add that right down onto the window. All right, there's a look at the finished card. I love how clean and simple this one was with that shaker element, and I was so excited to share those shaker tips to hopefully make it easier for you next time you decide to create one. And I just love how freely and nicely it shakes. And adding that playful monster down to the side of the heart just really completed this card. I absolutely love those little guys for using for Valentine's Day cards like this. For the next card, we are trying something new out with the heart-shaped stamping foam. This is so much fun to bring out during Valentine's Day. So of course, in the heart-shaped stamping foam pack, you get two foams that look like this, and both of them have this heart insert or the heart frame. So it's a great value inside of the package. You can either use this and have a white heart in the center kind of masked off, or you can use this piece and stamp your heart in different colors. I love the idea of it. So I'm going to use this heart stamping foam, and instead of heating it up and putting a texture in it, I'm gonna use it just plain like this. To stamp this heart, I've grabbed some great Valentine's Day colors. I love Love Struck because it's this kind of reddish pink color, which is gonna look really great. And I'm going to ink up the stamping foam. Now to ink up the stamping foam, I go in using my ink pad, and I just go in a swirling motion. Instead of kind of tapping like you usually do, because that doesn't give the best coverage of ink, this swirling is going to give you a really nice, dark, and rich color on that stamping foam. So once we got that good and inked, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to lightly mist this with water. I'm going to mist it about twice. It's just going to help the ink transfer, but we don't have any globs of water on the surface of our heart. And then I'm going to give it good pressure to make sure that this heart evenly transfers on the surface of the cardstock. And once it is, we can lift that off and you get a really nice solid stamped heart. That's why I didn't want to heat it or use a texture in it. I wanted just that beautiful, solid, and crisp image, and I love how it's stamped. Okay, now to clean the stamping foam, since I just used my Simon Hurley Create inks, they don't stain and they come off really nice and easily. So I just sprayed it off with a little bit of water, and then it will really easily wipe off the surface of the stamping foam. Now, if you use an ink that usually stains, it might stain the surface, and that's totally okay, right? Stamping foam is kind of a tool, and a stain stamp is a love stamp, but it'll still work just as usual. For this next color, I'm using a bit of Prom Queen, which is this kind of mid-tone pink color. And again, I'm going to do that swirling motion to apply a nice even coverage of ink all over the surface of my stamping foam. And just lightly mist it with water about twice. And now here's my idea, and let's see if it works. I'm gonna take it from where it was, and I'm going to just move it to the left a little bit, keeping it still kind of aligned with that heart and overlapping it. And then I'm going to place that down and stamp it into place, giving it some good pressure to make sure that it transfers. And then when we lift it off, we should have those two overlapping hearts. I love how that looks. It is just so beautiful. I'm gonna throw in an orange as well in here, so I'm gonna use a little bit of Roar, and again, follow that same step by inking out my stamping foam. And then this is what's helping me. I kind of line it up with what it was before, and then I just lightly shift it to the left, keeping it kind of at the same angle, straight up and down, and then I'll press it down into place to make sure that it transfers nicely. Oh my gosh, I'm loving how this is turning out. It's so cool and kind of retro, and again, wherever those colors meet, it just intersects and creates such a unique new color in between. All right, then last but not least, I'm adding a little bit of Shooting Star in here, which is gonna be my lightest yellow color. I'll ink up my stamping foam again. It's so easy to ink this stuff. Like, it's practically easier than stamping with a regular stamp. And then last but not least, I'll line it up with the orange, shift it to the left a little bit, and then give it some good pressure to make sure it stamps. Oh my gosh, I love it. And of course you could keep going down with more and more colors, and it's gonna keep creating new colors in between. See, it kind of brightened up that orange a little bit, brightened up that red in there. It's so cool and unique how it does it. All right, I've trimmed this panel down a little bit, added some adhesive for a nice border, and then I'll add it right on top of a horizontal stark white card base. Then I'm gonna use this little guy and use the I'm Wild About You sentiment. I think that one's a fun one for Valentine's Day. All right, then again, I'll ink this up using a bit of my VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink and stamp it down. And then we've got a nice crisp image. Then I'll throw over a layer of clear heat embossing powder, tap off the excess, and heat it until it's clear and shiny. So for this guy, I'm gonna color him yellow. And another super easy way to color these, especially because there's a lot of open space, is to go in using a mini ink blending tool. And I'm just going to kind of use the edge of the little blending tool to lightly blend in the first color. And it's really easy to kind of avoid certain areas and just add a nice haze of color over top of the whole image. All right, then here's where this gets really great. I'm gonna go in using slippery when wet ink, and I'm gonna take a little detail blending tool. These things are really awesome because you can get into the tiny little areas using them. So I'm going in using slippery when wet, and I'm just going to add a little bit of ink here and there all over this monster to just add a little bit of shading and some more depth to it. These detail blending tools are a life changer, and this really is just a simple way to add basic coloring to this image. All right, then again, I'm gonna quickly go in and fussy cut out this image, leaving a little bit of a white border. And this one's probably gonna be even easier because there's less details to have to go around with this. Then I popped up this monster on some foam tape, and I'm gonna add it down right onto the left side of that heart. Now I want the sentiment to be stamped in white, so I'm gonna go in and I use my anti-static powder bag on top of this cardstock. And you also wanna make sure the heart is completely dry. So I've heat set this to make sure it's nice and dry before I move into this next step. I'm going to use a little bit of Versamark ink and go into this You Look Beautiful sentiment. And for this one, I'm going to stamp it on kind of an angle. Again, I'm kind of playing off the playfulness of these images. and then I'm going to ink it up again. I'm going to move it down a little bit, angle it the opposite direction, and stamp it down. And then one last time, I'm going to move it down a little bit more, angle it, and stamp it down one last time. Then I'll go in using white heat embossing powder, sprinkle that right over top, and then I'll tap off any of the excess. And again, lightly blow off any of the excess powder to make it disappear. Then I'll go in and heat set this until it's nice and bright white. And here is a look at that finished card. I think it's so fun how we were able to use the heart stamping foam and overlap it like that to create many different colors in between and a kind of retro, playful, and colorful design. Then adding the monster on top and that sentiment really finished it off nicely and created an almost conversation heart look that I really love. This one would be pretty easy to replicate several times and give it out to some friends or a special loved one during Valentine's Day. Alright, for the next card, I'm using stamping foam again, but we're going to change it up a little bit. This time, instead of using the heart interior, I'm going to use the heart frame. And I have a feeling this is going to be the easiest Valentine to mass produce. So for this one, you're going to need a texture. You can find any texture around your house that the stamping foam will work with. Here, I'm using a stamp because it's going to create a reverse image. So whatever this is going to stamp, it's going to actually be white on here and the background will be colored. I love this school scribbles image because it matches the playful and fun nature of those designs of the monsters. And I think it'll be cool for a kind of Valentine's Day look. So I got the texture flipped over and ready. And when it comes to the larger frames of the stamping foam, I like to stand up to make sure that I get the best pressure on it because I can put more weight down onto it. So I'm going with my heat tool and I'm going to heat this for about 15 to 20 seconds. I like this Ranger heat tool because it gives off a nice heat and the heat isn't super concentrated, so it goes a little bit more evenly across the surface to heat up the stamping foam. So once you've got this pretty good and hot, you can then take it, turn it off, and flip it immediately into the design and give it some good even pressure all the way across the surface. So then when we lift it off, you can see that really great background that we got. And don't worry if it's kind of faint in some areas. Because of the larger surface area, it's not super easy to get a super crisp image, but you'll see this still turns out really great when we stamp it. All right, and again, it's Valentine's Day, so I wanted to use kind of pinks, purples, and yellows again. So I'm starting off with a little bit of Crown Me ink, and I'm going to lightly sweep it across this whole surface of the design, and you can see that even though we thought that the design didn't transfer super well, it definitely did. You can see once we swipe our ink across the surface there, it really shows off that design beautifully. Then I'll go in using a little bit of Love Struck ink, and again, using that same light swiping motion, I'm going to go in and apply the ink and blend it in with the Crown Me purple color. Next we got Prom Queen, and I'm going to blend that into Love Struck. Again, keeping with that swiping motion, and blending these colors together beautifully on the surface. Last but not least, we'll go in using Shooting Star and blend that together in with that pink at the top of the card. If you're having trouble getting a nice transition between any of the colors, just go in using a blending tool and it'll make it a bit easier to kind of blend between. Now I'm going to mist this over top of the surface about 3 times. Like I said, I just want a nice glistening of water, but we don't want it to be soaked. I brought in my top folding stark white card base. I'm going to line it up at the bottom of the card base, and then it should line up with the rest of the card beautifully, and we'll press it down to make sure that everything transfers and stamps really nicely. All right, and when we lift that off, check out that beautiful design that we got. I love how simple it was to stamp that heart, and like I said, don't worry too much if you don't see an image at the beginning. It all will show once you apply that ink beautifully. All right, and here's the cool part about this. This image will stay for as long as you want until you reheat the stamping foam. So if I want to keep stamping a bunch of Valentine's Day, let's say I'm doing it over several days, this design is going to stay until you reheat it again, so you can keep using it for cards like this. Then I'm going to go with my heat tool again, and it just takes about, again, 10 to 15 seconds to reheat the stamping foam. It's going to go completely back to flat, and then you're able to press it into any other texture you want. So if you didn't get it right the first time, reheat it and try it again. And if you want to keep changing textures, reheat it and it'll go flat. And then you can keep playing with different designs you might find all over your house. And if you want to step this up even more, you guys probably know my trick by now if you've seen my channel. I just go back in using that same blending tool and the same color in those areas. So here I'm using Crown Me, and I'm just going to go around the edge lightly to add a little bit of a darker color there. So I'm moving into Love Struck, I'm gonna blend this one out. So by doing this, it creates that darker edge, and it's going to draw your eye into the center where the lighter portion is. And the center of your card is usually where the focal point is, so it's going to really highlight that area and make it stand out. And you can just see that little detail adds a ton more depth and dimension to your card. I love it. If you want more of a friendship Valentine, I love this guy and his sentiment that says sending big monster hugs. I think you're cool could be a good one as well. And here's what you do if you want to keep your Valentines super simple. All right, I'm gonna take some black ink. So I'll stamp this guy down kind of hanging into that heart. And there we go. I really love the look of him. And I'm going to stamp it again at an angle, kind of in the opposite side of that heart to fill it in. And there we go. And that's like the simplest Valentine ever. You don't even need to color those images in. I think the color on the outside really stands out on its own. Of course, if you want to, you can color this in and pop it up like we did the other ones. But I wanted to show you an easy version that was super simple to mass produce. So that's why I love this white heart in the center. It allows you an area to stamp images and really have those be the focus without needing to add a bunch of color and really make it fancy. So if you have plans to make a lot of Valentine's Day cards, I hope that one is super helpful for you to save lots of time. Alright you guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's video, and I hope you have a wonderful Valentine's Day this year, however you decide to spend it. Leave me a comment down below letting me know which card project was your favorite, and also down there is a full supplies list to everything that I used, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and I'll see you soon for another card making and crafting video. Have a great day. Bye!